So it's the first week of spring term here at Gnomon, and I know we have a few new faces in the audience, so great to see you. I'm sure by week 10 you'll be looking very sleepy, so we'll do our best to keep bringing these inspiring events to you as often as we can to keep you motivated. So tonight it's a great honor for us to have such incredible talents here for a very special presentation covering the making of Section Studios' strategy battle game, Rival Crimson X Chaos. So we'll be diving deep into the visual development of the game. We'll discover how this talented team created the stunning arenas. We'll learn about the character art pipeline from concept through to final implementation. And we'll hear all about the challenges of creating stunning games for mobile. There's loads that they're going to be going through tonight. So let's begin by introducing our awesome speakers. So first, let's have a round of applause for Cecil Kim, Chief Creative Officer.
Hi. Got it. Nice to meet you.
So Cecil is a true legend. He's worked on many amazing games as a concept artist and lead, including Final Fantasy IX, Parasite Eve, God of War 1, 2, and 3, God of War Ascension. He also won a Best Artistic Achievement BAFTA Video Game Award for his work as visual development lead on God of War 3, which is seriously amazing. So kudos for that. Next up, we have Katon Callaway, game director at Section Studios. So another round of applause. Katon's been working in the industry for 14 years and worked for Activision, Santa Monica Studio, and DICE LA before joining Section. He's best known for his character work on the God of War series, and we're super excited to have him here with us tonight. Next, we have David Viola, lead artist at Section Studios. Another round of applause, please.
Just a wave.
David joined Section in 2015 and was previously at Nickelodeon Games, where he was working on the Monkey Quest MMO, and before that he was working for MTV making Facebook games, which is super cool. Next we have, they've moved around, so my list is different. We have one of our very own Gnomon alumni who's back with us tonight. So Daniel Johnson, character artist at Section Studios. Yay! Who has a fan club with him tonight, which is cool. So Daniel's been with Section since he graduated from Gnomon, and he's worked on many of their cool projects, including the award-winning title Eclipse, Edge of Light. And we're obviously very happy to have him back with us tonight. And last but not least, we have Kristopher Vita, character artist at Section Studios. Another round of applause. And Chris has been working in the video game industry for 7 years as a 3D character artist. And before Section, he was at Float Hybrid Entertainment and also Enway Games. So very, very cool panel up here tonight. And you'll have a chance to meet these awesome people after the presentation. And as I mentioned before, we'll be selecting 15 winners at random after the Q&A. So those raffle tickets that you were given when you came in, these books are so cool. They're leather-bound, beautiful, beautiful books. And I actually was just looking up the Art of Homeworld, and it seems to be like selling for like $1,700 or something crazy like that on Amazon. So definitely worth sticking around to the end to see if you can win. As you can see, tonight's event is sponsored by Lenovo. So a big thanks to Lenovo for helping us to bring these free educational events to you from the Gnomon campus. Tonight's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus. And if you're joining us on live stream or Facebook Live, hello, thank you for joining us. Please chat to us. We'll be on the live stream, live chat very soon. And we'll take questions for tonight's guests on there too. So please talk to us. And that's it. So let's have another big round of applause, and Cecil will begin the presentation.
How are you guys doing today? Good? What a perfect LA weather we had today. It was amazing. So it's good to be back on the stage. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly talk about what we'll be talking about throughout the presentation. So myself and Katon will be talking about a little bit backstory about how we went through development side, and then how do we set creative direction on both visuals and character design and stuff. And David will touch on more on the high-level side on creating low-poly characters with a very good high-fidelity production value. And then Daniel will talk about how he creates these arenas. And Chris will talk about some of the rapid texturing workflows. So we're Section Studios, and we've been around almost 7 years. And there's two sides of business we're focusing right now. One is game development, and the other side is doing art services, mainly concept art, but sometimes we work with other studios doing co-development. So we're about 55 people, and right now we're servicing 2 live games, and we work with a lot of game companies on the visual development side. So within 8 years, my departure after Sony, we worked on many different kind of games on multiple platforms, and Vlad and Dead Realm, they launched on the Steam, and also Tenosia being a co-dev with a company called Condescent Games, and Eclipse is a VR game launched on Daydream. It's also co-dev with White Elk Studios. And we have a game called House Flip with Chip and Jo. I don't know if you guys know Chip and Jo. It's actually live now, and will be live on iOS. We'll be launching on Apple in a couple of weeks. So, and also you have a Rival, which is the main topic of this presentation here. So you can see we launched games on multiple platforms, and all of these games are original IPs. So we love creating stories and characters and just a new universe. All right, Katon will
so if you guys don't know, if you haven't checked out Rival before, I'm going to kind of show it off, show our trailer, and then talk about it a little bit. But basically, it's a very fast-paced PvP arena battle game where you deck build with champions you collect. It's always something we wanted to make was very we always use the word AAA, I guess, production in your pocket on mobile. Early on, we always wanted to make sure it was fun to watch. We also, philosophically, when I say skill over gear, we've always tried to make a game that is more skill-focused first, and then gear second. And then, ultimately, a game we like to play, which it is. So let's show them the trailer. If you guys haven't seen it, this is kind of what our game looks like. So there's Rival. The fun fact is we actually made the trailer entirely in-house. Being a small studio, we've done everything ourselves that you guys see that we share with you guys. So on a lighthearted note, I made this slide actually. YouTube. Stop that real quick. But yeah, on a lighthearted note, I made this slide just to open the talk because when you're on a small team or big team, whatever, it is, people have stuff to say about it, always. And it's been quite a journey making this, and it recently came out, and I just want to give a little backstory. This best game ever made, this kid came into our studio and play tested it, and when he left, our lead designer was talking, and he goes, what do you think of the game? And he goes, this is the best game I ever played. And he was like, you mean on the phone? And he's like, no, best game ever. And I could have not said something better to our lead designer that day. And recently, since it just came out last week on iOS, and it's been on Android for a while, we're getting pretty good reception, which is nice. Hopefully it keeps up, and I put this one down. This is the best game I've ever played in years. It's always good to get some compliments. But at the same time, when you make stuff and put yourself out there, you get classics like this one. Died in 30 seconds. After downloading God knows what, I died in 30 seconds. The green says I was crushed by legendary things and fate is unkind. Well, guess what? Users are unkind as well. 1 star. Why I bring this up is because at the end of the day, when you work on stuff, it is just a game, and it's supposed to be fun. If you can remind yourself that, you'll probably make better stuff. And it's constantly something I try to remind the team. You're always going to get stuff coming your way, both good and bad, but you take it as you can. So kick that off, Cecil. You can take it back over.
So how it all began was about 3 years ago. I wanted to put together a prototype. So there's a few members of the team. We decided to make a demo, basically showing this hero-focused action RPG game. So it started with more like a linear battle stage connected, and then we designed a few AIs, and then heroes. And this is all the screenshot from that prototype we made. So if you look at this prototype, there's certain things that we want to emphasize on, which is linear procedural map generating technique, and also designing arena. That way we can have a challenge mode and stuff like that. And then also we had a really awesome boss intro, which worked out really well, and that really defines this prototype, kind of like letting people know that we know how to make this cool stage for the combat intro. And it was almost like full app with a UI and then some minor armor changes and stuff, except we didn't have a store function in there. So it's pretty cool, about 4 months of a sprint. And it's amazing how we actually put all this together in Unity about just 4 guys. So from there, we actually, following E3, we pitched this prototype to multiple publishers, including some of the publishers that know how to publish this action RPG game. And we actually received some investment from game publisher called 433. So we decided to, okay, let's go. Now we have to assemble a full team. So I reached out to Katon first because I always wanted to work with him, and I reached out to a couple friends of mine. Some of them actually worked at a God of War, Sony Santa Monica. So we started to make the full game after that. Yeah. So here, this is another year-long process of development of the new game. So one thing that we learned from here is we were developing based on the prototype, but certain things that we didn't really flush out in the beginning. And we were also prototyping some of the core game mechanics at the same time. So it started to lose a little bit of direction here. And you want to jump on? So here is during the middle of the production, we also wanted to put together a trailer so that we can share with the publisher and stuff here. Here's an example of the game.
That's old. That's about 1.5 years old. So to take it from here, I think it's, yeah, okay. So back when we started that, like Cecil said, we were making an action RPG, which is not what we have now. But one of the things we started doing back then, and what I want to talk about, is how we got to where we're at now. So very early on, the designer we were working with at the time said, people like tropes. Let's have tropes. We want tropes in our game. It's going to be a fantasy game. And literally that's how it started. We want Frankenstein, we want vampire, we want hunters, we want tropes. And that was the beginning, basically, of our heroes. On top of that, we said, well, we wanted a ragtag group because there's an action RPG at the time, and you could select heroes. We needed reasons to have like a group of random dudes together. So that was one of the other things we established really early on. And then we were going to develop a gameplay range around them, so like tanks, heavy hitters, specialists, and spellcasters. And that's literally how we started making the art of our game. As well as that, the creatures, we also went with tropey stuff on that, but we said to ourselves, outside of the tropes, we wanted to make a world that we could expand on. It was dark fantasy with tropes, but we also wanted to have some creative freedom, so we're like, let's have creatures in the game. You know, we want like this like cosmic horror-like edition. So some of the first things we established actually were those. So we wanted tropes, we wanted to be dark fantasy, and we wanted cosmic horror. And with that, we started to develop our world. In this actual little chart here I made really early on, kind of shows a little bit of how our thought process. Before we had really much of a story, before we had much going on, we tried to start setting these things up. So it was like, okay, we want it to be kind of familiar. We want it to be dark fantasy. We had influences from like Castlevania. And that we also wanted this like cosmic horror, Lovecraftian feel to our creature influence. So I made this little chart here. You know, you got like army soldier guy in the top left, and you'll see like werewolves and skeletons, and then eventually we want to get into this alien thing. And we only really, our real reason around cosmic horror is we just thought it was fun. And Cecil always had this idea of space dragons in his mind, and we had to have a reason for it. And that is literally how we started making and establishing the world. It was kind of that simple, and we began from there. And then from this point, this is where Cecil will talk about, we started to set other types of visual anchors. You can get into that.
Yeah. So to address to communicate the visual direction moving forward, so we had to kind of place the visual anchor. And within that visual spectrum we're familiar with, one side being like League of Legends and Dungeon Hunter. Those are awesome graphics. And other side is like Dark Souls and Castlevania is full like realistic 3D. But we wanted to like bring in that console experience to the mobile, but without having too much noise and too much. Well, basically the mobile is like first read is very important. So we developed a really good pipeline on the characters that it looks really good 3D, but the textures are pretty simple, and we focus on like shapes and like simple, clean textures. So after that, I had to have some sort of visual inspiration for me, and then the fact that I really looked at this film as a sort of benchmark, which is this is directed by Tajam Singh, and basically it's iconic characters, and he's not shy away from using saturated colors, and even the temples and architectures are very repeated, interesting shapes. So if you look at cast of characters, they're all from like different time and different culture, but somehow together they works well, because he was bold, making a bold statement, and it really strikes me. And I think this is very good communicating tool for me to tell the team, even the small tiny mobile screen, we can tell the epic story, and we can even tell the metaphor and like deeper stories about the characters if you understand how this director actually did. And also, like pure love of, from a love of playing games. I mean, we're natural game developers, so we grew up playing a ton of games. So Mega Man being Katon's favorite character. We've been always talking about these iconic characters, why people are remembering these characters and why they stood out over generation after generation. It's very simple design, and there's a strong color cues, and we remember about what they do, not necessarily what they talk and what, personality-wise. So even Kratos, so we always wanted to look at this as the philosophy when you create these characters. And this came on when we were actually doing the UI design. So I guess Katon and I were talking about what is our product? How do we want to package our product to the users and people? And maybe because of the phone, it felt like chocolate in my hand. So we wanted to focus on premium high gourmet chocolate packaging design, which is simple but has nice textural feel. And basically, this was our way of communicating to UI designers and marketings and stuff like that. Our game is more, gourmet chocolate.
Yeah,
okay.
I always say to Cecil, I want to make small, high-quality games that when you hold it, it feels nice. I don't need to make Hershey's and it be packaged to everyone. I just want to make sure when people pick up our game, they really enjoy it, and the details of it, it doesn't need to be grand. It can feel high quality regardless. So as we started to develop a lot of these anchors and visual styles, we started to work on our story. And I'm just going to go over this at a real high level because I don't want to get too deep into story tonight. But we basically wrapped our story around our gameplay and world goals. So basically, like I said, we wanted a story with tropes, we wanted stories with cosmic horror, and we wanted a reason for these ragtag guys to come together. With that, and we wanted reasons to go to places in our world. And this was all during the action RPG, actually. And we learned a lot during this phase. And the other thing is we tried to keep it simple so it could grow with itself. As we went on. And at this point, we actually made an action RPG for a good solid year. And that's why I was cringing actually looking at that video, because we really struggled because it was not fun. And even looking at the art, I was like, man, I can tell we probably weren't having fun because it's not as nice as it could have been. And a bunch of the things we learned in that, one is we weren't having fun. What we learned was when we were making a prototype is one thing, it's an idea, but making a product is something actually very different. And we learned that, unfortunately, over a year. We did not actually understand what we were selling. So we had to pivot. So actually, in December of 2018 now, so 2016, we're at the end of the year and we decided we need to do something. So we started a prototype, and our lead engineer at the time, we were taking a break for Christmas, went and made a prototype, and basically is the arena battle, kind of what we have now. And he came back, and we basically gave ourselves a short deadline, and that was like, okay, we have to make a decision on all this by January 23rd if we're going to do this or not. And so we basically played it and made ourselves make decisions, and we started having fun. We actually really liked it, and it was awesome. And that's where we started. That was basically January of last year when we started making Rival, kind of. So from this, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we kept from the action RPG and kind of what we just talked about going forward. So one thing we did learn is our heroes, they actually visually worked well. We stuck very early on to trying to keep stuff simple and not overcomplicate it, and we tried to keep stuff as iconic as we could. So like here, Gregor Frankenstein, he just has a simple reed on his right shoulder with the greenish blue tint. And our vampire, we actually tried to force more complex designs on him over time, and we actually always came back to this one. And I think it's because it's actually really simple. And in the game, he reads really well as this vampire dude with white hair and red. He's basically white and red and black, and Gregor is blue and white. And we took that. And the other thing we learned was actually how to make a single character feel good on the action RPG. We learned how to make stuff hit well, read well, and all that. We actually took all that over with us. So it's not totally fair to say we made this game in a year at all. But one of the biggest things we learned was we had all these characters that were actually kind of fun to play. We started transitioning into, for example, this marksman guy here on the left. He's just a ranged sniper. That's all he does in our game. He just comes out, he shoots really far. It's like classic RTS thing. And we had this guy on the left in the game, and as we started to make a game more about champions and less about AI, we actually had to shift all of the design on these guys. So we actually moved these guys, updated to give them actual more story and character and make them feel a little more iconic, because the AI themselves we found were just kind of boring. And we did the same thing with this girl. So she was a dark mage in our game. She actually all she does is hold characters in stasis. She's kind of from our cosmic side of the story. And we had this old design on the left, maybe like not even 6 months ago. And we just realized you never really connected with her. So we kind of changed her up, added a face, and changed her up a bit to make her, again, more collectible because they are champions. And this is just a little example showing of our pretty loose storyline. We have Crimson, Chaos, and Crossbreed. And Crimson in the story is basically the creator of the universe gets killed by Chaos. It spills its blood everywhere. And the natural things are from Crimson. The Chaos is this character that caused panic, and it basically tainted all the pure stuff and created these crossbreeds, which are things like werewolves, Frankensteins, vampires, and the like. And that's kind of as loose as our story gets. And now every time we develop characters, we actually put them in these categories and start putting them into different factions in the world and try and stick to them. At this point, we have, at least here, I don't know how many are here, but like 30 some odd in the game. They cross, like I said, across all the bloodlines. Every time we make a character at this point, we try and follow the anchors we set. We put them into the story. We don't just make random stuff. And with our story in the background, it really allows the concept artist to start running with it. And I know that's stuff people say all the time, but we really stick to the story and make sure they have a ground there. And same goes for the arenas, and Cecil, maybe you want to say something.
Arenas we also treat arenas more like characters. So this has to go through a lot of iterations, because if you make it too busy, then it's already fighting with the characters. So, I mean, you can see the variety of characters, arenas. We also, these are not just the random arenas. They actually have a story and why we set the stage on these locations. So, for example, like Lab Arena, there's a certain characters belongs to this place, like a Igor and Automaton and things like that. So going forward, we have multiple ideas creating these arenas, and basically like the one thing that also we did really well was how do we transition from concept to 3D, and these are all concept except the bottom two images here. So all the details down to like size of it's like tiles and stuff is matching one-to-one. Yeah. So right now we are basically doing two new things after game launch. Now we have to service the game. So marketing, can be a lot of different things. We do like streaming, and we also have a live ops team, and branding also, because now we have to really send out a message what this game is, and I'm working closely with graphic designers and concept artists to come up with these images. So this will be a really interesting topic because we're learning so much right now. Maybe you can save to next time if you come back. So, and I'll hand it off to David.
I'll switch. How's it going? I'm Dave, Viola, lead character artist. I wanted to give you a kind of an overview of our character creation, sort of high-level stuff and how we approach characters. They gave my bio, but I was working primarily as a 3D generalist until I started working at Section. That's when I became full-on character artist. And then when we made that pivot that they were talking about from the action RPG to the battle arena is when I became lead. These are a couple of my characters. This is another character. So this is actually Katon's character, but I think this is a good example of sort of how our characters appear. The image on the left is marketing material. The image in the middle is actually our in-game menu, but it's actually the same model as the guy on the left. It's just a kind of different lighting setup. And then finally, the tiny image on the right is the actual in-game battle model. And it's just, I think this is a good example of how we sort of design our characters to hold up in all these different displays. He looks super cool, all rendered out, but he also has to read really well on the right. And the way we achieve that is, Katon kind of touched on it, is just simple reads, simple color breaks, simple silhouettes, really definable silhouettes. So you know when these guys are really small on your mobile device, who's who and what they're doing. And that's really important on mobile, but I think for really any game. But all characters that we make obviously start with concept. This is the concept for the Hydra character, which actually just came out Thursday. Chris on the end, this is actually his character that he worked on. But again, you can see this character's got those very clear sort of shapes and color breakups. But when I as a lead, and even as the character artist, like look at the concept, there's like a few things that you should always be thinking about before you even start sculpting. I think it's important to, again, even as the character artist, and you're not the concept artist, but you should look at the character and go, okay, what are his reads? How does he read in the game? You want to know your product and sort of be thinking about that as you're making it. You shouldn't just be following the concept because it's the concept. You should sort of know what you're creating. There's also some technical things you might want to think about, like is this a brand new rig? Is he going to need all new animations? Do I have to figure out sort of how he's going to deform and animate? Does he need alpha? Does he need, is he mirrored? This guy, luckily, I think is straight up mirrored. But there are some technical things that you should just start considering before you just jump into a character. And then, is the concept enough? Like, do you have enough information to start your character? Do you need call-outs from the concept artist? We don't do 360 turnarounds, which I think is a good thing. Number one, we do a lot of concept work at Section, so we don't necessarily need to be wasting concept artists' times doing full turnarounds that, in my opinion, very rarely work out. If you get turnarounds, you can spend a lot of time trying to match your model to the turnaround and making sure everything lines up perfectly. But things just don't work that way in 3D. And at Section, it's really cool because we want our character artists to kind of run with designs. We don't want to have explicitly every little detail sort of concepted out. We prefer artists that can just take a concept and run with it and add their own flavor and bring something special to it. So once you have the concept and you know sort of where the character is going, it's important to do a quick block-in, especially for a character like this Hydra, who, like I said, was a brand new rig, brand new animations. You have to start figuring out some things, some proportions, some basic forms. So even though Chris worked on this character, this block-in I actually did, which is kind of cool with this character because he kind of bounced all around. But when you're doing a block-in, it's important to just keep it loose. Just start finding your forms, start finding your silhouette and your proportions. And just trying to get the essence of this character and how he will read in-game. I'm probably going to say how it reads like 100 times, but it's like the most important thing is just sort of thinking about your end product and how that character is going to look in the end. So once you have your block in, what we do is usually just quick Z-remesher. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with ZBrush's Z-remesher just to get a quick model out to Maya for something so they can start rigging. So we get a basic mesh to the rigger, or in this case, the actual animator, and she just starts doing some pose testing. Just trying to figure out sort of how it's going to move. Is that block-in sort of working? This is a good image because this is actually how this character navigates. He like rolls up into a little ball like a pill bug and heads down the arena. So it's really important that we figure out like, okay, can he deform how we want? are his proportions good? Are his forms holding up when he bends that much? There's a couple more poses. And what was cool about that is we actually learned quite a bit from that block in. It wasn't just for, for show. We figured out that like we had to narrow his body up a bit, so when he rolled up, he actually looked more like a wheel as opposed to just this ball with a tail. You start figuring out, okay, where the placement of the spikes should be, so that when he does deform, they don't bend in kind of weird ways. How long his tail will need to be to make that full circle. But then from then on, it's pretty much just sculpting. I'm not going to go into too much detail about sculpting because, you're at Gnomon, and there's plenty of tutorials, references, and teachers to teach you how to sculpt. But again, just some sort of high-level things that I think is important for a character artist is to, like I said, interpret well, it depends on the studio you're at. But we, at Section, we really like people who can interpret a concept and sort of bring a little bit more to it. I almost want to jump back, but I won't, to the original concept, but you can tell, you might be able to remember that he's actually quite different. He's the same character, same reads, the same spirit of the character, but Chris, brought a lot to it. And I think it's important that you take ownership of the character. By that I mean sort of feel like it's yours and you're making this character that you want to have some pride in and you want to take some care with. But on top of that, you also have to then be able to accept feedback on that character. So it's important to work non-destructively, first of all, because we work really fast. Most of our characters are done in about 2 weeks, plus maybe a couple of days. This character would maybe a little bit longer, because again, he was like a totally new setup. But if you're going to make a character in 2 weeks, you have to be able to move fast, but you also have to be able to change direction pretty quickly or make modifications pretty quickly. So once the sculpt is done, it's onto your low poly meshes. We do 2 LODs for our meshes. LOD 0 was the in-menu version, the really nice looking AAA almost character. Then there's the LOD 1, which is our low poly. So you see both of them are pretty low. I don't know if you guys do characters quite this low, but even our high res is only 4,800 tries. But something to remember is that you're not just making a low poly mesh just because it's low poly and it needs to be low poly. You're making the mesh that's going to be animated. So you have to set it up correctly for animation. And you also have to set it up so the silhouettes still read, the character is still the character when it deforms. So the most kind of granular thing I think I'm going to go through is this fun little, let me go back. This fun little tip for creating super low poly meshes. Often when you rig a character's like knees or elbows and they bend, you get that weird pinching that everyone gets, and it's really ugly. But more important, you start to lose the form. You start to lose the volume of the character, which on anything I think you work is important, but especially on a mobile device with characters this small, if their knees and elbows start pinching, they're coming down to like a pixel on the screen, and they're just going to like lose all their silhouette. And you can skin these things and work with the skin weights and adjust them, but it can be a little time-consuming, a little crazy. I mean, you can see this character I just pulled off the internet has like 4 edge loops around the knee, and kind of skinning that can become a bit of a pain. So there's a cool little trick that we use, and that's, so if you know your rig and you know your character, it's about you find the joint, right? So the middle here, that's our knee joint, and then you need a couple of edge loops to sort of hold the front of that knee, so when it bends, it's still it's holding that volume. But in the back, often what we'll do is we'll just put just one quad back there, just 2 edge loops and 1 quad. So when you know your sort of how that knee is going to rotate, the direction of the knee, that quad can just collapse in on itself and hold the volume. And so when it's done right, it'll look kind of like this. So you can see you don't get any of that weird pinching. And when the character like bends its knee or bends its elbow, it's just holding all that volume. And it's, you know, super low poly. But again, it's not necessarily about just the super high fidelity of the mesh. It's about the character itself and it holding volume and it looking like the character it's supposed to look like. This is another example. This is actually the finger of the gremlin character. But you can see it's just that triangle there is just collapsing in on itself, and when it's bent, it's still holding that full volume. So that's probably the more granular little tip that I'll go over. Most everything's pretty high level, but I think that's a cool tip. So this is the bake. So once you have your low poly meshes, it's time for bake. Again, not going to go into super detail, but I wanted to at least show this image because I think that's a pretty sweet bake. Chris has some really nice bakes, and that thing looks beautiful. That is a sweet bake. But so we have LOD meshes, so then we need LOD textures. So this is cool because this is, you know, our LOD 0 or high res on the left there, and our low one on the right. Again, I imagine you guys do a lot of 1K, 2K textures. Our LOD 1 is a 128 by 128, which sounds crazy, and I was skeptical even when we first started doing 128s, but I feel like from the back of the room, you'd barely be able to tell the difference between these two characters. And part of that is because of the clear sort of design of our characters. The clear color breaks, the clear forms, the clear silhouettes. It's really important that we sort of follow those ideas all the way through because, as you can see, this thing still looks pretty cool. It still reads really well. Here's another example. So this is an example of sometimes it's not just about necessarily crunching that 1024 down to 128. You can just go back into the texture and just kind of paint broad colors. Like this helmet, if you can see on the left, might be a little hard to see, but he's got like plating on his mask, where here it's all just values and colors. It's just kind of simplifying the shapes and simplifying the forms so that when they're shrunk down tiny, they still read. This I was just going to go over kind of quickly how we review our characters. Because again, like I said, we work super fast, and sometimes too many reviews and too many comments can kind of slow the process down. But I think our reviews and our feedback actually is super helpful and goes really well. But again, sort of reiterating, you're taking ownership of the character and you're bringing life to the character, but you also have to be able to take criticism and be able to work with your leads, or even other character artists have like opinions on your work. And I think at Section we have a really good working relationship across all our artists. We are able to just sort of trust our character artists to like go out there, start sculpting and come up with something super cool. And I think they have the mutual respect that when we give comments, you know, they respect those comments, and if it's something maybe they're passionate about, they'll you know, fight back a little. But there's no egos when it comes to creating our characters. We're all passionate about the game and the characters, but there's no ego. It's just about what's working best for our game. So this is just more notes. So we do weekly reviews where we're all just in a room together looking at each other's work and commenting and giving notes. But we're also encouraged to just post our work on our sort of tracking website. so that any time we can just, anyone can see the work and make a comment. Again, it's not just for leads or managers to make comments. Any one of the character artists can make a comment. And again, when you have no ego, all that stuff just is accepted, and you take all the feedback. But there's some notes, maybe simplifying some of the designs or making things pop a little more. But once this thing's gone through a review process, it's just time for it to get into game and get animated. So here is this Hydra character sort of in-game, and I think he looks pretty sweet. I mean, he looks really great in the the menu scene, high poly, but also, I mean, think about that 128 texture and how well that holds up in this tiny little characters over here. So I think this guy is pretty cool, but it's just an example of all, I think, of our really cool characters. And I don't know, hopefully you check them out. Hopefully you like them as much as we do. So that's it.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Daniel Johnson. I've been with Section for, like I said, about 2.5 years now. And prior to that, I was a Gnomon student. How many, just out of curiosity, how many current Gnomon students are here right now? Awesome. That's awesome. Are you guys tired? I remember sitting where you guys are now after about 10-hour work days in the labs here and just wanting to look at anything but what I was working on. So I hope you guys are hanging in there. So like it was said before, I was hired as a character artist through Gnomon's placement program, which I can't say enough nice things about. In fact, after my last class, I went back to visit my parents, and I was sitting on the couch kind of stressing out about looking for a job. And my parents were kind of bugging me like, hey, man, when are you going to get a job? And I was like, I don't know, I'll find out. And that moment, I got an email from Cecil and Justin, one of the co-founders, asking me to come in and for an interview. And I held my phone up. I was like, I did it. That was easy. That was easy. But anyway, I graduated in 2015. This was actually before they offered their BFA that they have now, and it was actually almost, I was graduating right when they were adding their actual proper games track, so a lot of what I was doing here was a lot of film-based stuff, until right up to the end, and then I was like, I want to do game stuff, and so after that, I was hired as a character artist, and as soon as I started at Section, I was jumping between projects just kind of where they needed me. So I started off being asked if I could do environments for a kind of internal project called Awake, which was featured at VRLA. And I said, sure. I had never worked on environments before. I said, let's do it. And it worked out. And so after that, I moved on to Eclipse, which won the best mobile VR game of the year last year. And that was in partnership with White Elk. And they both went really well. So I was hired as a character artist, so it might seem weird that I'm giving a talk about environment art, but the reason is, at least for Rival, they're essentially the same thing. Our arenas are basically just giant characters that you're playing on. And I know that for other studios that are working on environments, it's a lot of modularity and tiling textures and quite a bit more technical work. For this, these two things, this character and this environment, are just sculpted. That's essentially it. It's the same process, for the most part. So where to start? Every arena basically has all of the back end taken care of, so we have the same layout for every single one because
obviously each arena has to be fair in its layout. People have to be familiar with it. Even if it's a brand new arena, they have to know how it works. And so on each side, we have the 3 towers, and we have the 2 lanes going down the middle. So that's all taken care of. Collision, we have our camera, which is actually a fixed camera. We do have like a slight zoom in and zoom out. But for the most part, everything is taken care of. So all we have to worry about is art. And as soon as, even at the block-in stage, we can throw it into the game and be playing on it because everything else is taken care of for us. As far as time frame for these, it's basically the same as probably like one of the larger characters, so 3 to 4 weeks from start to finish. And we textured the entire thing in just a 2K, a single 2K. So this is the concept I'll be walking you guys through. This is actually not released yet, so this is a bit of a sneak peek on some upcoming content. This was done in-house by one of our concept artists, Lucas, and it's essentially an operating table on top of a giant robot in like a mad scientist lab. And going back to what Cecil and Katon were talking about, we like to portray a sense of story for our game. We don't think the game should be story-based, but it's being able to put out an arena like this, which is based on each character, is another way to subtly give context to them, especially if you have a favorite character that you like to play as, and then a new arena comes out for that character. That's another incentive to be excited. What's that?
There's no 3D.
And there's no 3D, right?
Painting.
In this, oh yeah, this is all 2D. The concept team at Section is like above anything I've seen before. So what I like to do, and I think this is important to show, at least, especially for students, because I think when you, at least this applied to me. When I was given an assignment and I chose my concept and it got approved, I was instantly like, all right, I'm sculpting now. I don't want to wait, I just want to sculpt. In this kind of environment, it's actually really beneficial to sit down for an hour and just analyze what you're about to work on. And try to figure out hurdles that you are going to have to deal with later on. If you figure it out now, it won't be a problem later. So the first thing you can look at is, this all, in the end, comes down to gameplay. Is this going to work in a gameplay setting? And so what I mean by usability is there anything in this that looks problematic as far as maybe it'll be too high poly to handle, because this is eventually going to go on a mobile device, and it needs to be able to run on a vast range of devices. And is there anything that might hinder the gameplay? Like, is there anything that the character might see and be distracted by while playing? Because we want them to be focused on the characters that are being played. The other thing you can point out is focal points. So this more goes on to like the lighting scheme. So what in this do I want the player to see immediately when they start playing, and then transition into focusing on the characters that they're placing down. Again, lighting, that's something that we handle actually in the blockout stage. We want to get that down first and get that approved by leads before we continue to make sure the mood is right. And then animation. So, and we're doing this more and more nowadays, but we wanted to add more life to these. So as you're playing and it gets closer and closer to the end of the round, we wanted the animations to become more and more intense to invoke that feeling on the player, like, oh man, this is coming down to the line. So it's a good thing to analyze this and figure out what can I add, or what can I at least mention to the other animators that we could possibly animate in this, so that it will add that kind of life to this environment. And then mirroring this, so this goes back to like traditional environment. We want at least a little bit of sense of tiling, so obviously this is a pretty symmetrical concept, so anything on the left I can mirror to the right. In fact, this one was actually divided into 4 quadrants, so, and that's just, we get more resolution in texture space that way too. And so now so these are the hurdles I was talking about. So in this one, there were things that I noticed. There's glass elements in the background, and because this is a mobile game, we can't handle refraction. We can barely handle reflection on some of this stuff. So Do we keep it? Do we try to fake it? I'll get back to that in a future slide. But the other part where these chains back here, we ended up just taking a lot of this stuff out because it ended up just, there's no way that we'd be able to do that with the fidelity that we wanted, with the amount of polys we're allowed for this kind of environment. And then the same with the wires down here. Seemed a lot of polygons, especially for anything cylindrical, but we ended up baking that down flat on the floor, and it looked fine. So this is the block out. I also like to kind of color break things so that when I present this to the leads, they can see exactly the readability of the different shapes in this. At this point, I don't care about topology. I don't care about UVing. I want to get this done as fast as possible because, again, we only have about 3 or 4 weeks to get this in-game and working. So anything I can do to get this done is a good thing. And you can see at this point we also get some of the lighting taken care of. Just to get the mood, it's inside and it might be underground or something, so we wanted to get that kind of like gloomy, like center-lit mood. So this is going back to what we found out from analyzing. So I wanted the focus to be on the center and the face. So as soon as the player gets into this environment or this arena, I want them to notice that they're playing on a giant robot, because maybe they'll miss that if he doesn't have a light on his face. And that goes. So that's the lighting. We also agreed that we wanted the gears on the floor, so down here, to be moving, and then this heart could be beating, like as the game's playing, and then later on, as the match is getting more intense, the heart could beat faster and faster, and we have effects going on, and then the gears will, rev up faster and faster. It just adds tension to the whole mood. And then we figure out the mirroring at this point too, so I can at least plan how I'm going to UV this. And then we decided the chains were too much, and we figured out a way to handle the glass, which I'll go over in a little bit. Because this is a fixed camera and we're not going to be rotating around, I was actually able to paint the glass to kind of cheat a little bit and mimic the objects behind it, like it was refracting. I'll go into that in a little bit. So at this point, it's been approved. I can now kind of just go on my own up until the end, because we have the mood, we have the lighting, we have the color breakups, and we have the shapes. So we basically know what it's going to look like. So my workflow at least, I just bevel everything in Maya. I'll choose certain edges to be a little smoother and some to be sharper so I can catch certain lighting, especially down here on the front. I'll have like a kind of a smoother edge just to get a nicer transition. And then I'll add scratches and dents and stuff all over it. But a lot of this is going to be done in texturing. And then I'll handle the low poly at that point too. And we try to stick around anywhere between like 20 and 30,000 tries for an arena like this. Okay, so after that, like I said, it's a fixed camera point. There's a lot of these faces that the player is just not going to see. And if we can cut that stuff out in order to have it run nicer on the phones, we might as well do it. So in the first place, I was worried that a lot of this robot's main shapes were cylindrical, which means it's going to need a lot of geometry to get that smooth curve on it. But it actually ended up being a blessing in disguise, because on the underside of a lot of these cylinders, you don't see them. As soon as that curve goes around so that it's behind itself, I can just cut all that stuff out. So you can see over here on the arm that's tucked up underneath the platform, that will never be seen by the camera. So before I even start UVing this kind of stuff, I'll cut that stuff out, and that also frees up more space on the UV sheets. Same with the head. So this head, over here, you can perceive it as being a full cylinder, but as soon as it makes that transition, it's all cut out. Okay, so I'll go kind of briefly through my texturing workflow. I know Chris is going to go more in depth in this. I primarily texture in Photoshop, and I know I know Substance is taking over the texture scene right now. And I work in Substance too, but for the kind of halfway between stylized and realistic feel that we're going for this game, I can get away with almost anything in Photoshop in the same amount of time. So the way I do it is I will take the color breakup that I've already created from the block out, bake that down just as my diffuse layer, and then using my maps that I've baked out, so AO, curvature, world space normals, I can use those black and white masks as masks for level adjustment layers, and then I just stack those. And so the reason I do that is because my main priority is to work non-destructively. So if later on, and this actually did happen for this arena, if later on we decide, oh, this red in here, we actually don't want that quite as red, can you change that? I was like, I can, 5 seconds. So I go into the level adjustment, slide one slider, and it's done. And we don't have to spend that much time on it. And so I'll layer these up, and you can see there's not a lot there. Like, I can get to this point with just a few layers. And that is mainly due to having really clean bakes. And I can't stress that enough. As soon as you are in the process of taking your high and your low and baking out these maps, spend some time to make sure that there's no little errors, because sometimes they like to hide in places that you may not think about until later when stuff's animating, and then you're like, oh, my AO is screwed up there. I have to rebake or go in and paint that out. It's so important to figure that out first so you don't have to worry about it later. And then we're on to lighting. So we do actually light bake for these, but we like to simplify it a lot. We actually don't bake in Engine. We actually do it in Maya with a rendering add-on called Turtle, which does rendering, but it also does baking. And the reason we do that is because we're able to bake out each light separately, and then as we comp it together in Photoshop, we can kind of tweak each lighting so that they're homogeneous or harmonious. So this is just straight texture, no light baking yet. And you can see I put in a lot of that kind of fake lighting already, especially like up on the face. You can see it kind of has like a top-down lighting already. Even down here, you can see a little bit of that gradient. And then along the edges, I go really heavy with AO, just so it'll pull the people's eyes closer to the center. And so the first layer I'll do is, and I hope this isn't too dark on the, oh, it looks fine. I do, and this is true for a lot of the arenas, we usually start with like a gradient spotlight in the middle to pull the audience's eye towards what we consider is one of the most important parts, which is our blood wells in the center. And in this case, it's the heart of the giant. And then I'll turn the lights on for that thing, so you can see that's just another layer in Photoshop. And then I can put that in, test if it's too much, because sometimes when you bake in Unity, maybe one of your lights will blow out, and it's hard to take that light, bring it down without it affecting all of your other lights. And in this way, we can separate it all out and handle each one on its own. So there's the other light lighting up the face to bring more attention to that. Turn on the lights in the glass in the back. And then I'll turn on lights on the side. So these actually weren't in the concept. This kind of goes back to what Dave was saying about taking ownership of what you're working on. They didn't need to be there. I threw them in, and at our review meeting that week, I was like, hey, I threw in some lights in the back that kind of look cool. And they're like, yep, they look great to me. So anytime you can do, I wouldn't say that would work in every environment. I think sections work culture, this kind of applies a little bit. So these are the towers that go in the arena, and this also applies to anything that's animated. We don't light bake these, but we need to fake the lighting on them as much as possible to get them to feel like they fit into the environment that does have a light map baked onto it. And this just takes trial and error. So I'll texture it the same way I would the rest of the environment, throw it into the arena in Unity, see if it fits. If it doesn't, I can easily go back, and the way that my Photoshop file set up, I can just change a few sliders until it fits, and it's done. And so the same goes for the animated stuff. So these need to feel like they're set in the environment. We can light bake a little bit on these, but we can't, like you can see around here, we can't really fake that shadow because these are obviously rotating. But if we get it close enough, they won't really notice. Same with the heart. So the heart can have a little bit of like light baking, like underlighting. But if it's not moving that much, it totally works. And this is an example of near the end. So this is in like the sudden death part of each map of each match when the score is tied and it's literally the first person to kill a tower wins. And so we want it to be as intense as possible. So all we have effects on the sides, we have the heart going crazy in the middle, and even the music gets pumped up at this point. And that all comes back to a certain mood that the player needs to feel while playing in each arena. So this is kind of what I was saying about faking that glass. Again, the camera is a fixed camera. It's never going to move like it is in this right image. And at first, I was like, "There's no way we're going to do this glass. Like, we're not going to be able to fake it so that it looks like it's refracting." And I went, "Oh wait, camera doesn't move. It'll work." So I actually took this into 3D Coat, stuck the camera to essentially where it would be in game, and then just painted on what I would assume the glass would look like, and then color picked from a screenshot of the in-game to actually paint in the fake background behind the glass. So just an easy little trick. It started off as a limitation, and then it ended up becoming a strength in a way. So in the end, all of this kind of culminates into does this arena read well? Because there's going to be a lot of chaos going on as the match is going on. People need to know where their character is and which character is theirs and which character is their opponent's. So this is actually, it's funny, this is actually an out-of-date screenshot because it does seem a little busy. Literally on Friday, yesterday, we changed this so this actually looks pretty different now. But that involves a lot of testing, so as soon as this is done, everyone's like, okay, we need to get it in game, we need to get in game, we need to see it on the phone, and have everyone in the studio play it so they can give feedback on, okay, as soon as one of my characters ran over this spot in the arena, it got a little muddy, and that's something that we can handle right off the bat. So just some final tips. Any limitations that you run across, especially while analyzing that concept, might become strengths in the end, especially along the lines of that glass. Another example of this is we have an arena that is out. It's a bazaar. The bazaar arena is out now, right?
Yes.
So we have a bazaar arena, which is like a marketplace, and it actually has an audience. So it has these people in the background that are cheering on the people in the arena, and in any other situation, all of those people would have to be rigged and 3D animated and modeled and all that. Because of our fixed camera, they're just 2D cutouts, and we just rigged these 2D cutouts to like raise their arms and wave flags and stuff, and it totally works. Everyone loves it. Every time they see that, like, oh, look at all the people. Another thing is the concept that you're given is not the final product. So the concept is the idea, especially for things that aren't like in the situation with characters. We don't do full like 3D turnarounds. So that concept is only going to get you 75% of the way there. The other 25% is up to our 3D artists to pinpoint things that maybe would make this character or this arena special. Like I said before, with just adding lights or adding, hey, maybe this thing could animate, and getting everyone else on board. That's another thing that isn't thought about in the concept phase. It's more thought about near the end of the 3D phase. And the last thing is just to be flexible and available. Again, I was hired as a character artist, and when I was asked if I could do environments, just say yes. Like, if you're inch of confidence in maybe learning it at least, just say yes. Because I think if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't be doing it in arenas. And I do characters too, but the fact that I can jump between the two is something that I kind of see as a blessing. So just be available, and don't be afraid to take on something that you're maybe not an expert at yet. That's it. So this is just some other characters that I had done. I do characters. I do.
And if I may say something about Daniel, not to embarrass him, but he is a Gnomon grad, so I'll speak about Gnomon here. But when we did go to the grad show, for any of you guys that are students, especially that are interested in games, the thing that stood out about him is I could see his technical thought process. It wasn't just a bunch of stuff he liked to make art-wise, but I saw that he actually thought through the technical aspects of making a game character, and it immediately stood out. The difference between him and everybody else was like instant for me. I could see, I mean, obviously he was a talented guy, but that was huge. So any of you guys that are interested in games, make sure it's very game-centric, and make sure it shows that. And I'm telling you, employers will see that when they are looking. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, hello. Chris. I'm Kristopher Vita, and I'll talk about texturing characters for our game Rebel. So this is the Grailnet, our armored skeleton. I want to talk about how to direct the eye towards your head, talking about clear reads. This is another character, one of the marksmen that was discussed a while ago. So as you can see here, like I hope that your eye is also like directed towards the head, which is the most highest specular value. And this is another character that I did, the giant, which I will talk about how to texture him and go. So this is the concept that I was given. The proportion must fit from he has a previously he used to be like a gorilla character. And now when we make a new character, he must fit into a new rig. So like a little summary. We have limited dynamic lighting in our engine. So we don't have real-time occlusion, no real-time reflections, no self-shadowing. But we do have normal specular and gloss channels. And it was previously stated that it has to look good in 1024 and 128 textures. And also, like, everything has to be done in 2 weeks. So that's a good challenge to have it. So, like, this is the high polygon sculpt for the giant. And having enough detail in there will make our lives easier when we do our textures. Because like when we dump it in the Substance Painter, like all the mask that we get there is reliant on how good our bakes are. So first, when we do our textures, the sculpt has to be approved. And then like, so we use marmoset tool bag to get our bakes. So one really helpful thing is that marmoset tool bag does really well is to assign the high poly chunk in the low poly chunk if it's named properly. So like this is like in marmoset tool bag. So as you can see in the left side in the outliner, like each chunk is assigned to its corresponding high and low. So it makes life easier. You don't have to comp stuff in Photoshop anymore and combine bakes. Another thing is like to assign like flat polypaint IDs in ZBrush when you bake. So when you bake it in marmoset tool bag, you get a really nice clown mask or ID mask. So here are some like educational links regarding baking. Like you just Google like marmoset tool bag baking, and like there's a free Gumroad there that says tool bag baking for Maya, which is really helpful. Also, like during the production of Rival, like we started using Nod, and then suddenly like, we stumbled upon like Marmoset Toolbag on how it will efficiently bake stuff, so we switched to Toolbag from Nod. So here are the bakes that we get from Marmoset Toolbag. We have our AO, our ID mask, our position map, the green channel of the world space normal, curvature, and normal. So all of these will help us aid in our texture creation. Also, I want to talk about that because we have limited dynamic lighting, like it also dictates on how much light we need to bake into our diffuse map. So like in order to fake all those reflections and stuff. So this is like a quick GIF on how stuff are. So it's very similar to like the Dota principle of shading, Dota principle of texturing. So we start with a base gray, we multiply our AO, and then basically we want a top-down gradient so that it focuses in the face. Most of this will be barely visible towards the end. But it's a great base to start from. So like this is the giant. You get a nice top-down gradient. You can control the direction of eye true values. And then also that you can control, apply gradient maps based on your ID. So like you can have like good color variation. And this is rendered unlit. And then when you render it with shading on, with normal map, like you can get good results. And then this will get you like maybe 40%, 50% of the way, but you still have to texture. So here are some additional links, like from my thought process. Like I was watching this guy, David Gray, when you use oil painting. Like he started from a grayscale, and then he'll paint different hues on top of the grayscale. So let me open up my Substance Painter file, and I'll walk you through my thought process and how to texture. So like this is the giant. We ended up removing his crown there. So I'm jumping in between channels. Let's see. Let's close that. At the start, like this is like the base gray that we get. So like we have our position map, our AO multiplied, our world space overlaid. Most of that we'll get rid of anyway, because like skin doesn't like having AO baked into. But so for now, like I will start with like dropping smart materials from Substance as a good base to start from. But I just want to make sure that when you export out stuff, like it doesn't look like a smart material. So we'll still do some like hand painting on. So I use a skin, the smart skin from Substance for the skin, and also for the fur to get some good color variation there. Also for the beard, fabric, another fabric for the rope stuff, and bone belt. And then that's a great base to start from. It's like to have all your materials in there. And then like, this is a great tip that I like to do. So like applying your AO, and then applying a gradient on top of it so that it's not like a straight up black, but rather like when you do a gradient on it, it multiplies red onto it. So like it's like faking like a subsurface. We'll do the same for the hair, for the beard. And then I want to talk about like texturing the face. Right now, like it's really flat. There's no like color zones there. So I'll start off like splattering like reds, yellows, and blues especially in the nose, I want to paint some reds in there. And then just like one by one, like building it up slowly. And then with some polish stuff, like making the transition from the beard to the face. Here we're bringing back some of the baked lighting that we got with an AO fill and another gradient so that it's not like a straight up multiply black. And now I want to start like breaking up, like directing your eye towards the top part of the body by adding a gradient from bottom to top. And now I'm starting to add more color variations in the fur. More polished stuff. And now from the concept that we looked for, he had some tattoos there. Yeah, just lots of polish, just one material at a time. Also, like I wanted to emphasize, like as I'm painting stuff, I'm also like painting roughness. The shading that we get from Substance Viewport is different from what we get in game, but it's good to have some variety in Substance Painter, and we make levels adjustments before we export in game, which I will show later. And then, like when we look at skin, it's a bit monochromatic, so like we want to fake some SSS there. So like I multiply the AO with the red gradient to fake some SSS there. So it looks like areas like that are in depth have reds in there. And then more just one at a time. At this point, like this is good enough to like get it in game, get feedback, and then it becomes like a back and forth towards the approval. Here I do a roughness pass on the skin. So like I want his nose to be shiny and his lips to be glossy. So as you can see here, like the face needs to have the most contrast so that people will look at the face. And then more cleanup, hair stubble, and just lots and lots of polish. So like in 2 weeks, like you have to be able to like budget your time towards how much time do I need to sculpt, how much time do I need to texture. So usually the more time you devote towards your high polygon sculpt, the easier your life will be when you texture. Your support maps, when you drop it into Substance Painter, will make your life easier. So all these remaining layers. Oh, so like also like I want to talk about our shader. We don't have grays in our opacity map. We can only do pure black and white. So this is like a opacity. So we also need to be work within our limitations and still make it look good. So I remember when I put this in game, like the skin wasn't really popping up, so I had to bring back his skin value up a little bit. And then like fur in the and then like this like more polish in the eyes. I lighten up his white areas in the eyes, darken the pupil, gave him an eyeliner, a little bit, just a little. Some beard color variation, just to like make it pop more. So like, hey, look at the face, the focal point. Hair pass still. And so like, when we get here, so like, this is like a little bit of summary on the painter demo that we did. So we start from base gray, smart materials, bringing back the baked lighting one at a time, polish, and then bringing back the values, and then shading. And then so that when we get there, so like the substance viewport and the Marmoset toolbag is very similar, but we want to make it sure that it looks good in-game too. So like when we go in-game, so like I made some levels adjustments on the roughness layer and the specular layer so that we get a similar result. So like this is it in-game. Here's it another version in-game. Also, I want to talk about like this is a bit low poly than usual. This is like sub 5,000. So it has to look good in 5,000 triangles and 1024 textures. So, and with opacity map. Here he is in the beauty shot. So like with this standardizing the method of like base gradient layer, smart materials, and then hand painting stuff, like you can get good result within like a day or two and then have room for feedback so that you can polish later. So that's like one good way to get stuff done in 2 weeks and then have time for polish. So like some texturing tips, like I use a lot of reference. I use Quadro. I usually have a mood board in my second monitor with like textures of the materials that I'm painting. Then I use a lot of smart materials, but I make sure that when I export it, it doesn't look like a smart material. I use a lot of color gradients. If my highlight of my, or if my shadow is warm, I make sure that sometimes the highlight will be cool, so that to avoid like muddy colors. And always like check your model in the final shading model, which is in Unity, because sometimes it may look good into substance viewport or toolbag, but then when you get it in-game, like it's using a different shading model, then you have to do more stuff. And then a lot of these tricks and techniques are not software dependent, which I will show like on other models later. So like, this is another character that I did, but I won't open up the Substance Painter file. So like, get the high polygon model approved, and then put as much detail as there with the time allotted. And then like start up with your base gray, and then like add your color gradients or your smart materials, and then pop some highlights, detail, more detail, direct your eye towards the face, and then like render it in like beauty shot. So like direct your eye towards the head. It has the highest specular value, even though he has gold in his like in his torso area. I try to make it not as overpowering as the head, so that you'll be able to look at his face. And it's like, so like here he is in-game. In-game. And then like here's another example, like different character, but same principle. So look at the high polygon approved. So you have your grayscale, top-down gradient, and you apply a color gradient to have your color variations, grunge and edge pass, make it look good in substance viewport, and then like translate it into in-game. So another example, like you get your sword from the vampire that we get. This one is just done in Photoshop. So like it's not software dependent. You don't need Substance Painter to do this. So like you have your gradient, you have your color gradients, pop some highlights, pop some edges, direct your eye towards the hilt, the bat head, because like the reason why I want to direct the eye towards the head is because like the blade is not kind of seen in the menu. So like like the bat head has the V there has the highest specular value. So like and direct your eye towards there. So like when he's holding there, it's like, oh look, there's a sword there. So same principle when in tower texturing. We get our top-down gradient, a color gradient based on mask, some edge and base colors, and just like polish, and then get feedback and polish, and then look at how the environment artist is working, so that make sure that you have similar styles in texturing and similar palettes, and then like finally like you send it to him, and then he'll make some adjustments, and then we get it in game. And that's it.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or do you want to move into the Q&A? Q&A? Yeah? Do you want to raise your hands? OK. I'm going to go to this one first, because he's closer.
So earlier on in the talk, you mentioned that one of your earlier designers wanted to use a lot of tropes in your character creation, but looking at the later gameplay and stills that you have, it looks like some of those fell off. Was that a conscious decision to kind of like push away from we just want to have tropes, or did it just kind of happen?
I can talk. It more happened out of practicality. So when we made the action RPG, we had 4 heroes that were more tropey, and when we transitioned to making a strategy game, we had to start with what we had and then go forward. So basically, we didn't have as many because they were mainly just heroes at that point. Going forward, and recently we've been talking about this, is starting to filter in even more and more tropes back in onto the new champions, basically. So for us, it had more to do with what we had when we transitioned, and going forward, we'll probably just start putting more into the mix. So, yeah.
All right, next question.
Hi, so you were talking about how the first phase of the game was not very fun. What about it did you think wasn't very fun, and how was that energy directed at first that you think made it unfun?
I can speak on this too. When we made the prototype, Cecil, I wasn't there yet actually, and Cecil made a prototype that was actually really fun and exciting. When we transitioned to an actual product, it lost a lot of what made that fun. It became, for example, like, okay, we need this mechanic in an action RPG. It needs to be grindy. Okay, so we need to make it linear. Okay, cool. We need this many enemies now. All right, cool. And eventually, over the year, we realized it just became super watered down and wasn't that enjoyable. The other part that when I say fun, too, is the whole package wasn't that fun. So like if we were just in the gray box and you took one of our champions and fought an AI, it actually was really fun. It was actually really good. But when I went in and started the game, opened it up, started a level, and knew my goals and stuff for the short experience, was not fun. It wasn't enjoyable to play in short sessions. So with mobile, most of you got that. If you play mobile, you know you'll pick it up and you'll play 3 to 5 minutes and put it down. So that loop has to be fun. What we developed that was fun was fighting with the champion, not the whole loop. And that was the problem. So none of us enjoyed just picking it up and playing it. So when we pivoted, that was the biggest difference. The loop we understood a lot better, and we understood what we were making and selling so that we could focus the experience more correctly as a package. And on top of that, the PvP itself is fun. The core is fun, but it's also easy and quick to get into a match, and upgrading stuff's fun, and the other goals make a lot more sense in that loop, if that makes sense. So yeah, the package itself was not fun.
And also the prototype was more of figuring out what to create the best with limited resources. So we knew exactly like how to go at it. But once you have a full team, people have better ideas and they want to try different things. And the problem was a lot of techs are not ready to go all simultaneously, because the mobile space, you know, it's like you need to know exactly what you need to do, and then you have to run in that production. But for example, like camera system, I mean, we didn't really figure that out, and we were already making an environment. Where prototype, we basically had a character running on the rail system, so there was no buildings on the side, which opens up epic view and like vistas and mountains and cool like competition. But once you start like cool buildings around it, every time we change the camera, we can't see the character, and there's a lot of problems like that. And team was slowly burning out because of that. Yeah, it was a big learning lesson, you know.
Yeah, the first year, the biggest thing we learned is what are you selling and what is the experience you are selling. We actually, looking back, did not understand that when we started. I think Cecil, when he made the prototype, very much had a feel and soul to the prototype. And if you picked it up, you'd be like, yeah, this is really cool. Like, why didn't you just make that? The problem was that when we got into action RPG, there's certain formulas that go into mobile loops on that was not present at all in the prototype. So once we started fusing them together, it lost its soul and character and any fun aspect. So when we started over, we made sure from the get-go that was there, and at that point, it was just a matter of polishing the experience because the loop was good at the beginning. So.
Awesome. One here.
So you do all this work, you make your game, and then what kind of things do you do for marketing the game? Like, what avenues did you go through? What places did you spend money at? Stuff like that.
So are you asking how do we approach marketing a game like
Yeah,
this?
I know it's a little, but that's like, I find like a huge part of, you know,
Yeah, I mean, that's like business class. You have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to speak on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like we decide to see what we have, and then basically we knew we have to do a lot of guerrilla marketing, and this is us being here is try to do anything we can to send the message out. The game is ready, download and play. So there's that to that, and then there's also like a lot of user acquisition and sort of things you have to do, use the social medias to sort of promote the game. And that is very technical, and there's all number driven and very like that's a full-time job. So that's why we have different department on that.
Yeah, we have, so the marketing, like Cecil said, we have a director of marketing, and he helps us out with the nitty-gritty. But what Cecil and I particularly work on is the branding of what they will use. So we tried, for example, this Rival. You know, it's on this funny, grainy background, but the Rival logo was part of the initial branding. So like the V, we kind of early on, we went back and forth, for example, should we have character faces for our app icon or graphic, right? So from the beginning, we wanted to feel like a high quality small package, and a lot of mobile games will do just like faces that are screaming or whatever. So early on, and it's a hard thing to not want to fall into that, and we still go back and forth, but we decided let's have a graphic symbol that's iconic. It's just a V, you know, and see if we can brand that to make it stand out as a high quality thing, not just another one. And so that's what Cecil and I have been trying to work on with our marketing director. And he'll take that and start pushing it, but on top of that, we'll work with the marketing he'll have different ad campaigns he'll try. And through that, we'll like assist him on art assets. But overall, we just try and get a certain tone. We don't have some of those images here, but Cecil's been working close with some of our graphic designers on just tonal images to send like a message of like, this game is like cool, epic, and high quality. It's not just like another cartoony replica thing. And so we very much try to be our own in branding, and in our marketing, he will say, if the game is good and branded well, he can run with it and use it. And then he just takes it and tries his thing with like different ad campaigns and whatnot, and then he'll have random ideas we'll help him out with. So I don't know if that explains it at all.
Yeah, awesome. Any more in the stage? We have we have a live stream viewer called Caesar who's been watching all night, and he's curious to know if you guys plan on making any more games and what might we be able to expect from you next.
Well, it's kind of early to plan that. I mean, console games pretty much is a packaged product, and there's a DLC and all the future contents now people are doing, but this type of games is for a long haul. I mean, we launched the game. Basically, our mindset is we're going to take this game to moving forward for years. So we're already seeing there's a fan base forming, and that's why, like, for me, when it comes to marketing, it's more like connecting with them now, because we're not set out to like please everybody who's going to play the game, but we recognize the fan base, and there was love coming from them, and making sure that we are connect with our community. So, I mean, one thing is really exciting is this is basically the portfolio of our studio's ability and potential. So there's not many studios that are our size and this type of growth that can pull this complex character-based strategy game, and it's a real-time network connected. So we have to prove that we can also service the game and we can also sustain the network side, which is a huge task. So we're not done yet. I mean, once we have that in place, then we can think about doing different project. But this is our fate.
Yeah. I mean, this is our baby, but I will say, Cecil and I talk all the time. I love our game. I actually think it's really good. Yeah. But if you're directly asking me what I want to make, and Cecil and I would like to make a small adventure game type of thing. Like I love Zeldas, God of Wars, Dark Souls. I don't necessarily need to be that big, but we always talk about hoping to eventually make an adventure game. And possibly we always talk about in the world of Rival, just kind of extend that. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, we have a lot to do still.
There's always been jokes or rumors in the office amongst the artists that we'd make like another game based on these characters, like whether it's an adventure game or an action RPG. And I think that's just a testament to the team and also just to the IP and the characters. Like if we've worked on some of these things for a year or 2 years, and we're talking about wanting to work on them more and more stuff for these characters to do. I think that's kind of a testament to these characters and how much we actually enjoy making them.
Yeah. I mean, we launched with 33 characters that are pretty much units that are necessary to be in this type of strategy game. But after that, all the new champions are coming out. They're just crazy ideas. There's things that teleport. There are dudes like crazy because this full 3D game is not 2D graphics. So there's a lot of cool the effects and animation that we can do with the characters. So I'm super pumped. So make sure you download the game. It's free. And give it a try. Yeah.
Excellent. Just quickly, Caesar just reminded me on live stream, do you guys have any esport plans for Rival?
I mean, obviously, if it happened, that'd be great. I mean, our game could be an esport, sure, but at this moment, we cater it more to like mid-core, hardcore audience for mobile, which is tricky with how you design mobile. Our lead designer would hate me for saying it's not an esport because it's on the phone. But yeah, obviously, like if that were to happen, we'd be all about it. Our game is being set up and worked on in a way that's very fun to watch. And we have some tournament features coming down the line because we host a lot of tournaments internally. And we want it to be about competition and it to be not just casual. So for sure, like obviously esports the word these days, so if that we want to call it that, I'm all about it.
Cool. All right, next question is here. Yeah.
What inspired you all to work in the mobile space? Did you see an absence of like a hardcore type game in the mobile space, or like what drove you to make this type of game?
I can talk again, I guess. For me, because Cecil and I both came from big games for years. Most of my career was on big studios. You know, we met on God of War. I wanted to try to. A lot of consoles gotten to the point where actually, I'm thankful that a lot of it's gone back to gameplay. But for a while, it was all about technical stuff, rendering, high poly. Stuff started taking forever. character stuff was getting insane, the amount of work that goes into them. Not that I don't mind the work, but I prefer more of the like broad stroke when it comes to art. And when I met up with Cecil and they were making this game, mobile appealed to me because it was a little more broad stroke and not as much caught up in what engine you're on right now. We have a lot of limitations we work with, and I actually like that a lot. I think it forces us to get creative and still make something look nice. So that attracted to me a lot. When I started, I was in the PS2 days, like PS2, Xbox days, 360. I don't remember which one that was. And I always say to these guys, like, games look cool on the Super Nintendo. Like, why can't we make an amazing-looking game on the phone? And so to me, that was a new challenge that I liked. I liked that we spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks on a character and make emotion from it and not have to spend. I have some God of War friends here, so they know the pain of time. I wanted a change of pace and work with guys making fun stuff. It's just a game, just a different type of game. Yeah. Maybe everyone has a different answer, but that's mine.
Does anyone else want to add to that? Or should we go to the next question? Anyone else?
I can take one more
No?
question.
I was asking if you wanted
Okay,
to add to the answer. You can take a question.
Yeah, because originally we looking at Eastern market as entry, and over the development we realized we need to stick to what we know better and focus on Western market. And the only way to do it is we have to ask ourselves, and we'll go with the guts. So I think that product lands really well, and it appeals to a lot of audience here. And yeah, between like mid-core and hardcore, I think we land somewhere between, close to mid-core, I think. It's still easy to pick up and play, but man, right now it's obvious when you see a high-skilled player playing. They pull some tricks that, wow, it's crazy. And that's like really exciting, I think that's how Blizzard made their game and just became such a huge culture. And I think as long as we focus on like units and like balancing and just stay creative creating these characters, and I think it'll be awesome.
Thank you. Okay, another question here.
So, and I also wanted to ask, maybe for David, Daniel, and Kristopher, were there any characters or arenas that you were making that seemed very like, you think it'll work, but it didn't work, and it was like you had to give up a baby?
Chris.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of characters that were made that didn't make the cut. So, yeah. But like, as you earn more years in this industry, like, you start to not to get too attached to what you make, but at the same time, like, give the same amount of love to everything. So, yes, there's stuff that gets cut. And I hope that it'll show up one day as a new unit, but,
Chris actually made a really cool character, and it was all ready to go in the game. He actually left for a couple weeks because he just became a father. And when he came back, it was like, yeah, that character's not working. And it wasn't the art, it was just the design had to kind of change. And so you can't really get like too attached to things, because sometimes just the design doesn't work and things happen. But that was just funny. He came back and was like, sorry, that guy's getting changed.
Yeah, that happens.
When I first got to Section, I was working on what Rival used to be, which was Blood Tales, and so we had a lot of NPCs that were kind of in like the hub world of that game. And during like partway through working on a bunch of the characters, I moved on to a couple other projects and ended up coming back on when it became what it is now. And a lot of those characters that I had worked on were like, no, we can't use those. They're all NPC types. So we're working on redesigning them a little bit to bring them back, but man, a lot of that stuff is like in the fire. Like, it's gone.
So like to add to that, like I showed like a weapon demo a while ago. Like I made a lot of weapons for the action RPG, maybe like 15 of them, and I think only one ended up in the game. So just don't get it too attached, but give the same amount of love to everything.
Yeah, we try to do good with the, we didn't go much into how we make champions, but we try to do our best early on to make sure it's fun to play before we get too far with these guys. But like they said, it's not uncommon for we finally get to this place and we're like, it's just still not that fun. And we've learned better to not force it, and we will cut it. We try to avoid that as much as we can, though. So.
All right. Any other? Okay, we have another question here.
Hello. I was wondering, like, do you have a team of people, or maybe a few people that focus on game mechanics, or is that sort of like a team-wide thing?
Yeah. So we have basically it's me and 2 designers. We have a lead designer, myself, and another designer. And we are pretty much responsible for most of the mechanics, but that'd be unfair to say the rest of the team isn't involved heavily. So we play every day together, so everyone plays our game. And surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, because I think it is good, they play all the time. So people naturally bring ideas and mechanics to the table, especially if you're playing other games like League or Dota or HOTS. People constantly have ideas. So it's not uncommon for us to hold brainstorm sessions with the team. We'll basically say like, hey, if you have an idea, you better come with a design doc, here's the template, otherwise you don't get a talk type of thing. And so tons of people will show up and they'll have tons of designs, and from that typically we'll take them, and if we like some of them, we'll prototype a certain amount and then play test with each other. So it's pretty natural. But for the most part, that's where then myself and our lead designer come in to help kind of filter it and keep it in line with like what is missing in the meta, like what roles do we need to go forward, and then these guys will all help us out and figure it out. And then because we are small, other people will naturally just come up with different ideas all the time. People can't help themselves but give feedback and be like, oh, this thing would be really cool in the game. And it's not that uncommon for it to actually happen, honestly. So, yeah.
And we get pretty competitive in the office when we play the game, so it's not uncommon for people to be yelling that things should be nerfed because they're angry they just lost. So.
Yes, definitely is that.
So what, obviously you're talking more about the studio. What's a day in the life at Section Studios like, if you could describe it?
Right, how you want me to go? I start first? No, I think just asking anyone. You can answer, Chris.
Just anyone.
Go for it.
Oh, at 3:30 we play Heroes of the Storm. And then I play a round of PUBG before I go to work. Before I go home. Yeah. I love chicken dinners. So.
That was pretty good.
But I make sure that I have my task done before I do any of that.
He's honest.
That's why I like make ways to speed up your workflow so that you can get more chicken dinners.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
I used to play StarCraft too, but my right hand started
Chris is actually really good, and then he had issues, tendinitis.
Yeah, so.
No, our studio. Most people come in around like 9:30 to 10:30, and we play every day at 10 o'clock our game together. So most of the team is there, and then from there, it's like most places. We're pretty small, so it's kind of rowdy actually. We don't really have office rooms, so you'll sit down and for a moment, and then someone will be talking about whatever for the day, and you'll find yourself in these conversations, and you have to be really careful to just like, put your headphones and go. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, day in the life. Yeah, we play together every day at 10 and just hang out making games, and it can be crazy. Now that we're live, it's actually a little wild. We have like these screens that show like installs and like how many PvP matches are happening. So it's real deal now type of thing. And we have like, I don't know if you guys use Discord. It's like a social chat platform, and we have our own channel, and that's getting really active now. So we engage with the player base a lot more now, which is really fun for everyone. So throughout the day, I'll be on there talking, and laughing at each other because we're, saying whatever on Discord. And then, yeah, we host tournaments and stuff and troll people on the team all the time.
Cool.
So, and play games.
Sounds fun. Daniel, so as a Gnomon alum, I'm going to torch you a little bit. So we have we have some new students here who've just started in spring term. So can you give them some advice, please?
Yeah. I like to mention to people when they asked about my life here it was probably one of the hardest things I had ever done, but one of the easiest choices that I ever made coming here. You're going to have really, really long days. And to be honest, once you get out and you're graduated and you have a job, it gets easier, honestly. But no, like this place felt like my home for the whole 2 years I was here. I would come here at 9 in the morning, and sometimes I wouldn't leave till 1 in the morning. Like I just wouldn't want to go home because I liked just hanging out. Like everyone felt like a family, so it was like if we're all in a lab late and we're working, it usually devolves into us just kind of getting really loopy and playing some weird video up on the big screen. But we all were there to critique each other, and if one person we could tell wasn't up to the level that the rest of us are, we would let them know harshly. But that's good for you. Like, that's the way it should be, because as soon as you get into this kind of environment, it's going to be the same thing. But yeah, you guys will be fine. Like, it's not bad.
Awesome, thank you. Let's have a big round. Were there any more questions? No? Let's have a big round of applause. Thank you. All right.